marketing like was thought leader interview. My name is Harshit. I'm the Director of Business Alliances of two amazing marketing SaaS tools, RankWatch and Websignals. We have a very special guest with us today, CEO of growth agency, Spades Media, Jim Banks. Jim, welcome, and I'm so happy to host you today.
Hi, nice to be here, Harshit. Thanks for inviting me to come along and speak.
Well, then, Jim, please tell us a bit about your journey. How were you like when you were a child, and how you got to where you are today?
Ooh, wow, that's a really kind of interesting question. So I was actually born, even though I've got a British accent, an English accent, I was actually born in Scotland. But when I was like 4 years old, I went out to live in Hong Kong. I lived there for 20 years, did all my schooling out there. And then after sort of 20 years in Hong Kong, I decided to come back to the UK and try and see if I can kind of get a job. So I did 12 years working in insurance, so financial services. I did that for about 12 years. And every year I made more money, but every year I hated the job more and more, right? And around about the sort of mid-90s, the internet had just started, right? I got really kind of hooked on it. I got my first Apple computer, or actually, no, my first Windows computer with Windows 3.1, right? That was my first Windows computer. I was running up really, really big telephone bills because we were paying on dial-up. So obviously when broadband came about, it was fantastic, right? All of a sudden, just like one fixed fee. So I became like really interested in the internet as a potential career opportunity. So my first job in kind of digital marketing, if you like, was I was the kind of basically the national sales manager for a web design company. And this is around about sort of 1999. And obviously we would build great websites for people. And then the clients would say, well, what do we do now? Right. And obviously the next thing is, once you've actually got a website, is you need to try and do some SEO and rank the site and, just basically do some marketing of it. Right. So, so for me, it was a case of, right, okay, we built the websites. All of a sudden I needed to learn about marketing. Right. So, so I learned a little bit about sort of, again, SEO. PPC wasn't really a thing back then, but I sort of soon became aware of the fact that PPC was something that people could do. Right. So, so that's where I switched my attention. And really, since I think in 2000, I set up my very first sort of specialist paid search agency. I sold that in 2006. I then got involved in affiliate marketing. I did that for a couple of years. Then I got involved in programmatic back in sort of 2010. And really sort of like in 2010 to 2012, I was really learning about programmatic, but I was sort of semi-retired, right? I kind of like, I took a little bit of a break and just sort of relaxed and chilled out for a bit. And then in 2012, the agency that I'm running now, Spades Media, I set that up in 2012. So this is like our 10th year of trading. And really, I mean, I would guess it's probably, although it's an agency, I call it more of a consultancy. So we're a consultant agency, an advisory. We do a lot of advisory work for people, consulting, training, as well as running campaigns for clients that we work with. And in some cases, we'll run just one aspect of their marketing strategies. It might be they need help with Google, and we'll just run their Google ads for them. But it could be that some clients that we work with, they don't have any sort of marketing expertise at all. So we run like everything. So we run all their Google, all their Facebook, all their Microsoft, everything, like across the board. Gotcha.
I think S in the Spades basically stands for both Superman as well as SEO, right?
It's an acronym. So it was like SEO, PPC, affiliate, display, email, and social media, right? That's kind of what the Spades stood for. And obviously, I think our sort of solutions that we provide to customers has changed a little bit since I came up with the name, right? But but obviously I stuck with the name.
Why did you stop SEO? I mean, I'm curious.
I think in some respects, I mean, sort of back when I first started doing SEO, it was, it was sort of a lot of keyword stuffing and, like, I mean, really, it was kind of black hat stuff, like stuff off the page, right? Stuff that really kind of got you into trouble, right? And I always kind of said that what we were really doing is we were helping Google back then, right, to learn the things that they needed to kind of fix in order to make it more safe for the kind of the end user, right? So, so I think in some respects it was kind of, I think it wasn't a case of like I didn't want to do SEO. I just think it was one of those. I think I was better at PPC, right? So I just kind of chose to do that rather than do kind of like something else that I wasn't particularly good at. I think the thing is I met up with a lot of people back in sort of 99, 2000. And I realized They were technically much better than I was in terms of the kind of coding side of things and just understanding how everything worked.
Yep.
Right. And it was much more sort of articulate when it came to, writing ad copy and stuff like that. So that's really kind of why I elected to kind of go down the route of running sort of paid search rather than organic. It's not that I don't believe in organic, right?
Yep.
I always say to people, look, although we are a paid search agency, I want you to do well organically, because if you do well organically, it means
Yep.
we'll have more budget to kind of spend on paid traffic.
Yep.
So,
Yep. Plus, paid ads give you better quick results, right? Compared to organic, which needs a lot of discipline, right? So
yeah, and I think really, Harshit, the thing is that SEO and PPC work really well together, right? I think the SEO team can learn so much from the PPC team, and the PPC team can learn so much from the SEO team, right? And if they work together in a business, right, then they can achieve really good things.
That's true. That's true. And one thing, I really love about paid marketing is it kind of gives you, because it is quick in nature, right? It helps you so much refine your messaging to your audience, understanding your audience better so quickly, right? You can simply run an ad with a really good title that you feel that is something that will really work with your target audience. But then again, the matrix and the KPI says something different. If you want to try something, else and make that work. So that's the beauty of PPC, quick results.
I've always said to people that PPC or paid media is not a magic wand, right? It doesn't make up for a bad website, poor product, bad customer service, right? You've got to provide all of those as well, right? Yep. You can't just have good paid ads and expect to kind of do well, right? Yep. So you need to have kind of everything kind of working again cohesively and collaboratively for the betterment. I always kind of say to people, I say to my clients, I don't care about your experience. I care about your user's experience. That's, for me, is the most important thing. If I can provide your end users, the people that buy your products, right, or your services, if I can provide them a good experience, then overall everything will work, right? Okay. The kind of platforms we work with will be happy, right? Because we're providing a good service to customers, right? My clients will be happy because they're getting good sales, and I'll be happy because I've got happy customers, really.
Gotcha. One other thing that your agency does, and it's pretty good at it, is consulting people and enabling them with the top-notch CRM and automation tool, Hubspot, right? When did you start doing that? What are the specific modules of Hubspot that you cater to?
Yeah, so I mean, so we became a HubSpot partner, probably, I guess it must have been 2016, something like that. So probably five or 6 years ago. And again, I think it's sort of we decided to invest in a kind of an enterprise level CRM, right? Because what we found was we were sort of building websites, we had our own website in WordPress, and we found that we were spending a huge amount of money kind of bolt things onto kind of WordPress, because what WordPress gave us was the kind of the core, but there was bits that we needed to kind of add on that really weren't included. So we invested a lot in additional plugins and some customizations and everything else, right? And we found that sometimes there was all this kind of people were trying to hack into WordPress, so we kept having to kind of update it and change hosting, and it became really troubling, right? And for me, I wanted to kind of the CRM should be something that kind of supports our business, not something that we have to go in and worry about content delivery networks and stuff like that, right? So I think in some respects, HubSpot is, again, I think of it a bit like a Swiss Army knife, right? So it's got lots of different kind of components, right? And not all of those components will be beneficial and relevant to every single customer, right? So, some customers will get a lot of value out of the workflows, whereas others will get less value out of it, right? Because of the way they got their sort of marketing and sales teams structured. So for me, I think, again, what I'm trying to do ideally is have an individual conversation with one person, but do it sort of in a way that sort of becomes a bigger sort of scaled proposition, right? So, so again, it's really, I want you to think I'm talking to Harshit rather than I'm talking to a big group of people, but really, again, I'm using the sort of the technology to help provide that. And again, what I can do is I can use what they call smart content. So I can create a page rather than having to create 10 different versions of the page. I can use lists that people are on, or pages that people have looked at, channels that they've come from, to dictate what the content on that page actually says, right? So it'll be good for things like quality score on Google Ads. I can kind of change it so that if the keyword is on the page, I can actually change the title, change the description, add keywords into the page, add them as alt tags on images, right? Do all sorts of things like that, which again, doesn't necessarily impact the front end in terms of how it looks, right? But it certainly helps with your quality scores on the back end when it comes to kind of Google's, what Google think of it.
Definitely. I think it also kind of gives a better advantage to the end client as well, because then your duty is not just limit to kind of like just delivering leads. You're also like, with the CRM, you're kind of like enabling the sales team as well to actually convert those leads to the actual clients, right? And that is something very critical for a business, right? What will you do with all those leads if you're not able to convert them?
Yeah, because again, I mean, like the marketing and sales need to have a kind of a contract between them to say marketing's job is to deliver, high quality and high quantity leads, right? Sales job is to kind of follow up on those leads in a timely way and close the loop with feedback to say that somebody bought a product or that they've made an appointment with somebody to see them, right? So again, that information should really be fed back to marketing. And then from there, marketing can feed it back to the platforms, right? So again, we want to make sure that if we're telling Google to kind of find leads for clients, right, that they find the right lead to begin with, it goes across to sales, sales does the business, right, closes a deal, then sends that back so we can then upload that data to Google to basically say, that keyword on that day, on that device, on that particular one with the kind of the click ID, right? That's the one that generated a $5,000 sale for us, right? Bring me more of those, right? And then that way you're kind of closing the loop and helping Google with their machine learning and artificial intelligence to learn what to do when it comes to what ads to kind of serve up, right? Because I think so much of what's happening now, right, in today's day and age, like so much of it is moving to this automation, right? So what's happening is that certainly with Google, Facebook, Microsoft, they're all moving to kind of dynamic creative, right? So you give them a bunch of titles, a bunch of descriptions, a bunch of images, right? And they will create the ads on the fly based upon the kind of context of where somebody is. So it'll be like device, location, time of day, day of the week, right? What they've done historically, what they're in market for, that will really dictate what the ad should say, right? Rather than you having to create 1,000 ads, you can just say, right, there's 15 titles, 4 descriptions, right? A bunch of images, right? And then Google will go off and make the best ad for you and give you that data. And then, every single person is getting a unique experience rather than it being everyone seeing the same ad.
Yep. I think, Jim, you made a very good point here. Basically, like, one of the biggest struggles that businesses have is, and even the marketers, right, is basically attributing right which channel is actually generating you qualified leads and that is getting converted. Just like you mentioned, communicating it back to that particular channel, right? This is something which is really working. How do you cope up with that, right? Is there a few tips for the viewers basically to help them out?
Yeah. So again, I think attribution modeling is a really important piece of the puzzle, right? That I think a lot of businesses struggle to do well, right? And I think part of the reason that they struggle to do well with it is that it tends to be that within an organization, there's no one person or group of people that own it, right? And what you tend to find is that the SEO team will be claiming credit for everything. The paid search team will be claiming credit for everything. The email team will be claiming credit for everything, right? The kind of, the social media, the content, the organic content creation team, they'll be claiming credit for everything. And what you tend to find is that usually what happens is that it's all of these components working together that actually brings about the conversion taking place, right? So again, if you've done the right work at the beginning to set up your buyer personas, right, then you can actually map out what that journey typically might look like. And you tend to find that when in an omni-channel business, right, that the touch points could be 10, 20, it could be 15 different touch points before people actually get to where they need to get to, right? And I think, you get a lot of people will talk about the sort of top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, right? And I think when you look at it, I mean, that's a kind of really simplistic way of looking at things now. I think, people talk about funnels and now I think if you look at HubSpot is now more about the flywheel, and it's about that removing the friction from that sales journey, right? Which is using all of the different touch points in a way that helps people move people along. Because if you think about it, if your objective is, because I think a lot of people the objective they think is to just generate sales. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it could be to generate loyalty. Sometimes it could be to bring people back, right? So again, if somebody is, let's say you're a site that does dating, right, for argument's sake, right? So people will either do one of two things if they join up for a dating agency. They'll either find somebody, in which case they won't need a dating site anymore, right? Or they won't find somebody and they'll have seen all the people that are in their area and they'll decide to cancel their subscription. So you as the kind of the content owner, the dating site, you've got to try and do things to make it more appealing for people to stick around, right? And ultimately that's like acquiring new people to come in. So you've always got new people for them to see, right? But equally, it could also be that you need to start looking at sort of changing your pricing models, right, when people might be tempted to kind of leave, right? So if you can identify from your data that typically people will last for 4 months, right, what you want to try and do, that's why you see people, they normally say sign up for 6 months and get a discount, because it's more cost effective for them to have somebody for 6 months, knowing that they're probably going to leave after 4, than to do it month to month, expecting them to do 6 months and they leave after 3, right? So I think in some respects, like I said, I think that attribution modeling is really important, because I think so many people make decisions about whether to continue with a channel, right, based on really poor data, right? And again, I'll give you 2 sort of very specific examples. So like a lot of people now are listening to podcasts, right? They're listening to Spotify and stuff like that, right? So there's an awful lot of advertising dollars being spent in audio ads, right? And obviously with an audio ad, there is no click-through, right? So there's nothing that people necessarily click on, right? So if somebody's listening to Spotify on their mobile, right, they don't have a kind of like, I mean, yes, there might be a sort of a companion banner that goes with it, but that's generally kind of like a very, very small percentage of the people that will see that, right? So what you're relying on is that somebody will hear your audio ad, hear what you've got to say, and then go to somewhere like Google and maybe type in your brand, right? But those 2 kind of channels working together, right? So you could kind of go, well, audio ads are horrible. They don't perform very well, but really they could perform incredibly well because they work in tandem with Google, right? So really it's a case of, you need to look at all of the data in a holistic way, right? We use so Google Analytics, you can kind of set up an attribution project in that, right? So we always suggest to people that they do that they set up an attribution project. But I think also it's a case of, you just need to try and understand what the story of the data is telling you, right? In terms of, again, it could be people are spending too long, too short, that you need to introduce things into your marketing mix that you don't have now, right? And I think programmatic for me was one of those. We introduced it into our marketing mix because we felt that a lot of people were leaving the ecosystems that people expect them to stay in. So the Facebook ecosystem, the Google ecosystem, they were leaving those and going somewhere else. And we wanted to be able to continue the journey with those people when they left, right? So, and then obviously send them back into kind of like either the website or the social media platforms or whatever it might be. We just wanted to continue the kind of story at that point, right? So we know that people have seen 2 or 3 of our stages of the journey, right? And we would pick up the conversation at the point in time that they got to in that journey.
Gotcha. In the recent few years has gained a lot of traction, right? It has been around for long, but a lot of brands and marketers have now started to take huge interest on this, and there's so many tools coming in market right now around it. What are the tools that you prefer using and for your paid campaigns mainly, and to purpose that it solves for your agency?
Yeah. So again, I mean, like we currently spend a ridiculous amount of money on tools to kind of like set up campaigns, manage campaigns, report on campaigns, like competitor research and stuff like that, right? And again, I always kind of say to people that really you should be looking at it from the point of view of you probably should spend somewhere between sort of 5 and 10% of your overall kind of marketing dollars, right, on tools and research to enable you to kind of do your job better, right? Because otherwise I cringe whenever I see people talking about, they post on Twitter, oh, I'm just kind of running tests on Facebook, I'm running tests on Google, I'm running tests here and there, right? It's kind of like running tests is really expensive, right? I think it's much better to not run as many tests, right? Because you're able to kind of do the research in advance and actually decide what will work, right? based on the knowledge that you have. So again, that could be, like market research for your clients, right? It could be competitor research in terms of, because again, I would say it's sort of probably 70% of your success will come from what you do, and 30% will come from what you do in response to what your competitors do, right? So it's kind of how do you kind of keep ahead of them by being smarter than they are, right? That's what you're trying to do, right? So again, I think it's really just a case of, a lot of people go in with crazy high bids on Google because they think that's where they need to go, right? Whereas what we tend to do is we'll work it from the kind of like the bottom up, right? So we'll go in much lower and work our way up, right? Because we don't want to give Google money. We could avoid giving them, and there will come a point when you need to kind of try and find where the sweet spot is, right? Where it's kind of cost effective for you to run it, right? You're not losing much impression share, but you're still getting the kind of the best results, right? So like I said, I think from the point of view of, specifically some of the tools that we use, I mean, we're massive fans of supermetrics, right? So we use supermetrics a lot for the kind of capturing of data. And again, we tend to find what we're trying to do is we're trying to store the data ourselves to enable us to kind of do research kind of like at some point in time in the future, right? So we can have like a lot of warehousing of data where, we'll use something like Google BigQuery to actually sort of warehouse the data, so that maybe we've got the ability to be able to kind of look at things like, again, maybe sort of 2 or 3 years ago is when people should be looking at what is the normal sort of traffic sort of solution, right? Because I think if you look at it, the last couple of years with the pandemic, right, the whole traffic and everything's gone on its head, right? So I think you can't really compare what happened last January to the January before or the January before. Whereas if you went 3 years ago, that might give you a better understanding, right? And I think in most cases, most people don't have that sort of data, right? They don't keep data for that length of time because they're not thinking in longer periods of time. They tend to think of, like, I switched some campaigns on at 9 o'clock in the morning and it's now 11 o'clock and it hasn't delivered what I need, so I'm going to switch it off, right? And that's, to me, again, I look at things in a much longer term kind of way rather than a shorter term, right? But equally, what I try and do is I try and make sure, I mean, I'll tell you a funny story. So I was working for a travel company, and one of the ladies that worked for me, she came to me and she said, Jim, I want to kind of use this this paid tool that we have to kind of create Facebook ads for us, right? So when I actually looked at it, I mean, we were spending a lot of money on Facebook advertising at the time, probably, 300,000-400,000 a month, right? And this particular tool was like a sort of tool where it charged a percentage of the spend that we made, right? So I said to her, so let me get this right. You want me to spend more money to buy a tool than I pay you as a salary? Would it not make more sense for me to get 2 more of you rather than a tool that will really, again, a tool is only as good as the person pressing the buttons on that tool, right? I always kind of said, like, just going out and buying software for the sake of buying software is a really dangerous thing, right? If it's a research tool, every single person will get the same research. Again, I love SEMrush or SEMrush, right? But again, it's like, if you do any sort of keyword research, it's like that the same data is available to every single person that has a subscription, right? So if you're trying to kind of differentiate your proposition, how can you differentiate? And sometimes, again, I think sometimes that's where, you need to try and read between the lines or zig when people are zagging to get to the point where you can actually be ahead of where your competitors are.
That's true. That's actually a very interesting point. How do you differentiate it? I think still a human touch is required. And even though, like, a lot of tools may claim that you can basically automate things, but still you need analysts, right? That's a big part of
it's funny. I mean, it's like I've got it sitting here, right? I mean, this is a book called The Checklist Manifesto, right? Or how to get, Checklist Manifesto. And basically it talks about, like airline pilots, when they get on a plane, they don't just kind of sit down on the plane, buckle up their seatbelt and fire the plane up and go. They have a whole checklist of things that they need to make sure are working before they actually put it in place, right? And certainly we as an agency, we've spent a huge amount of time documenting all of our sort of processes, right? So that anyone that kind of works on a campaign, right, follows the same process, right? When it comes to kind of research and, kind of creative modifications and everything, running tests, right? Everything has a process, right? And everyone follows the same process, right? And I think that uniformity gives us the opportunity, right, to kind of like bring it back in. So yes, we want to take advantage of the machine learning and artificial intelligence that Google and Microsoft and Facebook give us, right? But at the same time, we need to have an element of input into what that actually, what that actually looks like and what it does and how it can impact the overall performance, right? Because again, like Google and Facebook and whoever else, they don't know the businesses the way our clients know the business. Even we don't know the business the way our clients know the business. So we're relying on them to give us the data to enable us to kind of run the campaigns, right? And again, when it comes to, if we've done our sort of buyer persona creation properly, right, then we'll avoid a lot of the wasted kind of money that a lot of people seem to spend on testing things, right? Because we understand. I mean, everyone talks about how great TikTok is, right? But they're not giving the context of who is their target audience, right? Because TikTok is Snapchat. They're typically for like people under the age of 25. That's their target audience, right? So if your core audience for your clients are people over the age of 40 or 50, right, then TikTok and Snapchat would be a horrible place for you to go, right? I'm not saying that you wouldn't make money, but I just don't think it's where you should kind of dive in kind of feet first, right? Because I just don't think you'll get the same results. So, I think sometimes, like, again, a lot of people say, hey, my business is now a 8-figure business or a 7-figure business. It's like, yeah, but I don't have the context of, how much money did you spend on advertising and how big's your team and, how many complaints are you getting, what your returns like? I mean, there's so many pieces of the puzzle missing in terms of understanding whether, if a business is, doing 7 figures, 8 figures, right? But they could be doing like 12 figures. I mean, that's not a good business, right? So, so again, I think it's really kind of, you got to have context of everything to be able to decide what's what.
Makes sense. How's a typical client journey in your agency? Like, how's the onboarding process and what follows next?
Yeah. So I mean, as an agency, like we understand the types of customers that we're looking to attract, right? So a lot of what we're trying to do is to make sure that everything we do is done to try and attract the right people to the agency. Because I think that the challenge is a lot of agencies, when they set themselves up, they go, yeah, we just kind of do Facebook or we just do, whatever, right? And I think you need to kind of like niche it down a little bit to kind of get to the point where, you have a kind of a set of skills within the business that is good enough, right? And not watered down because you're trying to go kind of horizontally rather than vertically, right? So as a kind of general rule of thumb, we are looking for primarily e-commerce businesses, direct to consumer. So we tend not to work with businesses that are startups. We tend not to work with businesses that have bricks and mortar stores. So it's pure direct to consumer businesses, right? Ideally, what we're looking for is businesses that are doing between sort of $1 and $5 million in revenue now, right? That are looking to do between sort of 5 and 50 million, right? That's kind of like where we're trying to grow them, right? So we say we're a growth agency, right? And ultimately that's our sweet spot, if you like. That's not to say that we don't have clients that are sort of outside those scopes, right? I mean, I've got some clients that are startups because I know the people from back in the day, right? So I'm prepared to kind of to change the rules a little bit in that respect, right? And similarly with consulting, I mean, I consult for different clients and some of them are B2B, some are doing lead gen, some are doing all sorts of different things, right? And for me, that tends to be more of a, again, sort of, I consult for people, they may kind of book a couple of hours of my time a month. That way we can kind of get on calls. They can kind of be kept abreast of the current, like, if you like, legislation of what's going on in the market and what new opportunities there are. Because obviously we're a kind of a Meta partner, Google partner, right? Microsoft partner. So we get access to what's going on, right? We know what's here now, what's coming down the line, right? What changes are going to be made. And we can help put the clients that are running stuff themselves, like in good shape so that they don't kind of find in 6 months time when something new becomes mandatory that they go, hey, I didn't realize that this was coming. So.
Okay. And what special do you do? Because in an agency business, definitely the churn rate is something which is always challenging, right? For marketing agencies, right? So is there anything that you specifically do which kind of like differentiates your agency as well to improve the client retention?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is when we kind of onboard a new client, so we have a kind of a document, it's called the first 90 days, right? Okay. Basically what it does is it gives us an opportunity, right? So the way our kind of pricing model works is we typically have a fixed fee for that 3-month period, right? Because we feel that that gives 3 months gives us long enough to be able to work with the client, right? To understand what is required of getting good results for them, right? So, so again, I think the challenge is very difficult to know in advance, right? When you're trying to price something up, right? How much time you're going to need to spend doing things, right? So I always kind of say it's a bit like the Goldilocks effect, right? We could spend too little, too much, right? So I want to make sure I give every single client that we work with the opportunity to get success, right? So I need to make sure we allocate the right resource to it, that they allocate the right resource to it, right? Because again, I mean, I'm usually a pretty good judge of character, right? But there are occasions when we've dealt with clients who are pains in the asses, right? And I don't want to have a long-term 12-month commitment to work with somebody that I think is going to be, detrimental to my team, to me, right, to them. I just don't think it's going to work, right? So it's much better to have the opportunity in that first 90 days to flush out all of the challenges so that when you get to the end of the 90 days, right, you know how much resource you're going to have, right? And you can also at that point in time work on proper data to understand what a performance model might look like in terms of, what your compensation could be moving forward, so that it's very much in line, like your efforts are rewarded commensurate with the value that you bring to the table. So if you deliver fantastic results for a client, you should get paid incredibly well for it, right? And if you don't have to do a lot of work, right? I almost like, I say I'm embarrassed. I'm never embarrassed about it because it's something I've been doing for a long time. But like I have clients where I bill them a lot of money, but I don't have to do a lot of work because I've done all the research and the heavy lifting over the past 20 years to know what to do, right? Yeah. They're happy to do that. They're happy to pay me because they know, right, that things are going to go well. They're going to get sales consistently. They'll be in the kind of the ballpark in terms of where they need them to be, sort of in terms of the acquisition cost, right? They're happy with it, right? And they don't say, how many hours did you work on it, right? Because that's not what it's about. It's not about how much time did you spend on a project. It's about what do the results actually end up looking like.
You are basically charging them for your experience, right? And you have invested time building these expertise, right? So it's
and like I said, it's a performance model, right? So again, as an example, so because I work with e-commerce clients, right? Typically, Q4 is a very busy quarter, right? Because most of the clients rely on that sort of, the sort of time, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas, right? Then we obviously move into kind of like we've got Valentine's Day coming up fairly shortly, right? Then we'll have Mother's Day, Father's Day. I mean, there's lots of different things, but generally you tend to find that probably most e-commerce businesses that are selling products online, right? Will try and get a decent percentage of their revenue to come in that Q4 period, right? So we, like I said, I bring a lot of people into the team to ensure that we can deliver the right performance for the clients that we work with, right? But I don't expect my clients to pay me like in sort of March, April, May, or whenever, when things are quieter, right? Because it's a performance-based model, they pay me less money, right, during that period. And I'm happy with that because I know that I don't have the kind of the overhead of, 20 people working on a project, because the people that are kind of enlisted to the help on the project, they're there for that period of time when I know it's going to be busy, right? So it tends to be like much more fluid in that respect, right? Because my compensation is more fluid, right? So like I said, there'll be some months where I'll get paid a lot of money because we're doing a lot of work. Some months I'll get paid a lot less for a client, right? And I'm happy for that sort of situation to be the case.
Gotcha. Let's bring the conversation to your core expertise, which is paid ads. Like, a lot of business actually struggles with which KPIs they should basically focus on. And how exactly do you go about measuring your paid ads and improving their performance altogether?
Yeah, so I think the challenge, right, for a lot of advertisers is that they're trying to play to the tune that's being played by the platforms they work with, right? So they'll work with Google or they work with Facebook. I'll use those two as examples, but it really applies to others as well, right? So if you run ads on Facebook, right? So ultimately, right, Facebook kind of give you the option of kind of like deciding on which pricing model you want to run, right? So you can choose like lowest cost, right, maximum conversions, right? You can run cost caps and stuff like that. Generally speaking, again, it's like in most cases, if you have a realistic kind of target acquisition cost, right, and you're looking to sell product, that's the only metric you should really care about, right? Honestly, like I see people that say, oh, I'm optimizing for my add to carts, right? Or my initiate checkout. And I'm like, why? You don't make any money if somebody adds a product to the cart, right?
Yep.
Money if you sell things. That's the only time you make money is when you sell things. So for me, I always say to people, so that's really what you should focus on. And they go, oh yeah, but Facebook says I need 50 conversions a week. I'm like, I don't care what Facebook says, right? Your focus should be on generating sales. That's it. And you should be generating the sales at a cost that is within the scope of your business actually being successful, right? So if you're selling a product that is $40, right, probably you need to, if you take in all of the overheads of running your business, you probably need to make a 400% return, right, in order to kind of break even almost, right? So, but again, you can kind of like say, well, different products will have a much higher or lower margin, right? They maybe have a different higher or lower return rate, right? They may be lots of upsells. There may be kind of like lifetime value, right? And that's not really an arbitrary, 50 conversions a week kind of number, right? That's something that is much more fluid, right? And you as the business, you're in control of that data. Facebook don't know. They just kind of like throw this number. You need 50 sales, right? Just who cares, right? Similarly with Google, Google will always suggest you need to spend, your bid is below the threshold to be on the first page. So you need to spend $4 a click. It's like, I can't afford $4 a click, right? Because you're not converting for me. I can afford 45 cents a click, right? Yep. That's it. That's all I can afford. So I always say to people, don't be lulled into spending more than you can realistically afford to spend, right? So for me, it's really just a case of, being in some control of your own kind of destiny, right? By dictating kind of what you want. So again, I like the metrics that I care about, right, will be typically kind of like return on ad spend, right? But I also kind of like have an eye on lifetime value if certain clients. So again, I work with some clients where they have a subscription model, right? So they're selling products that is a monthly recurring subscription, right? So for me, it's like we may spend more in acquiring a new customer in the first instance, right? But we'll just spend some money in trying to kind of get people to re-engage, right? As an example, if you were a company that sold, let's say you're a company that sells like a meal delivery service, right? So you're sending a box of food out to somebody, right? What you're relying on is that person actually consuming the contents of the box, because if they don't consume the contents of the box, they're not going to buy another one, right? If it's blocking up their freezer, they've got this freezer full of, stuff that they've ordered from a meal delivery service, right? And they don't use it, then, eventually they're going to go, stop sending me the boxes, my freezer's full of stuff, right? Whereas if you actually think about it, if they were using their ad strategy correctly and their email marketing, they would have a proper bonding sequence. So they could actually send an email to somebody after, say, 4 days to give them new recipes or, new ideas or new suggestions or user generated content of people that have kind of created their own product, right? So again, like try and make it sort of fun. And that's something where again, you're not necessarily looking to generate a new sale. What you're trying to do is consolidate an existing sale and get them to become a longer term lifetime value customer where there's significant value for them. And again, those are the sorts of things where I don't really think an arbitrary target ROAS, target CPA, like LTV target, right? I just don't really think that those cut the mustard as far as, helping you to understand what you should be focusing on. Again, in simplistic terms, if you're a company that's generating sales, right, then my focus would be on, optimizing for a conversion, website conversion, right? And if you are if you're a business that's doing B2B, I would say focus on generating leads, right? That's it, right? At the kind of the most cost-effective way that you're able to.
That's true. Actually, it's a very good point. A lot of marketers even business owners, tend to focus a lot onto acquiring new customers and not catering to, they're already like big customer base altogether, retargeting them and inducing repurchase. And that is much more cost effective, right? And it give you better results compared to acquiring. And your overall marketing cost actually drastically goes down, right? And you make better returns altogether. So,
yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if you let's say you ran a Black Friday promotion, right, and you sold, I don't know, 10,000 products in the space of that Black Friday, right? There's 10,000 people that bought from you this year, right? There's no reason at all why those 10,000 people shouldn't buy from you next year when Black Friday comes around, if you can kind of put the right offer in front of them at that time, right? So for me, again, I always kind of say there's a huge amount of money tied up in your existing customer base, right? Both from a point of view of them buying from you again, but also from them leaving you testimonials, reviews, ratings, telling their friends. Again, like if somebody's bought 12 times from you in the last year, right, that person is a raving fan about your products, right? They should become an evangelist for your product. They should be the person that you should be looking to do interviews with. You should send a team, a film crew out to see them and film some proper professional shot video, right, where you can actually get a real good testimonial from an existing customer, why they like you, what you liked about, what do they like about the product, what do they like about the service, right? The community that you have, right? So many things that you should be doing, right? That if you said, these are my top 5% of clients, right? Like those are the 5 that could probably generate half of your new customers just from them kind of giving you the opportunity to kind of talk about how much they like your company. Because you can say, I can say, my company's fantastic as much as I like, right? If I have other people saying my company's fantastic, that's got to be the kind of the killer for me.
That's true. That's true. Jim, since you have been like one of the really early adapters of programmatic advertising, right? Please tell us a bit more about that domain altogether, because a lot of businesses have now started entering and leveraging the channel because of the need, right? What are the good ways for them to kind of like a starting point and become successful? Few tips that you can share with them, and also if there's any beginner tool that you would recommend using.
So the platform that we use is called Basis Technologies, right? And they have a really good like educational portal, right? So first off, I would say if you want to learn about programmatic advertising, then Basis have like an academy where you can kind of sign up for an account, right? And you can learn all about programmatic, and they talk not just about their own products, but they talk about the kind of the industry in a more holistic way, right? Which again, I think for me, there's a huge amount of opportunity. There's a company called Coursera, right? Who have, again, they have like a load of different sort of training programs all about programmatic advertising and everything. But I think to put it into context, if you are buying any form of media, right, in most cases, it is being bought in a programmatic way, right? So even though I talk about programmatic as a separate thing, right? I mean, when you buy from Facebook and Google, it's done programmatically, right? You know, there's far too many moving parts for you to be able to decide what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, right? There's way too many moving parts now within any sort of ad platform for you to be in a position to be able to decide what to do. And the whole idea with programmatic is just like basically the decisions that used to be made by humans are now being made by machines, right? And ultimately they can do all the computations much quicker than we'll ever be able to do, right? But I don't think it's kind of like just the machines on their own will do well. I think you need that human and machine kind of working together, right? And that'll be much better than just one or the other on their own, right? But when it comes to programmatic, I mean, I think the thing I like about it is, you know, their algorithms are kind of really kind of clever, right? You can kind of set it up. You can basically say, I want to run on these different exchanges. You know, there's a lot of inventory that's available that is unsold, right? So a lot of the inventory that Google has on the Google Display Network, right? That's more or less the remnant inventory, right? So they have the kind of Google Exchange where the premium inventory is sold, right? And in a lot of cases, it's the same inventory that finds its way down to the Google Display Network. And I find with programmatic, it gives me the opportunity to kind of go above the display network to get specific deals in place with placements that I know have worked well for me, right? So I can kind of like approach a publisher directly to actually say, you know what, I really like your site. I want to kind of buy a specific slot. I can maybe take a tenancy on there rather than, because again, if you think of it, if you're a publisher, your objective is to make as much money from selling the ad inventory that you have, right, as you can, right? So for me, it's really just a case of the inventory that finds its way into the remnants, right? So the kind of, like I said, the Facebook audience network and the Google Display Network, right? That's the remnant inventory that hasn't been sold by the publishers at a more premium level, right? And for me, I find in the programmatic ecosystem, I can be in a stronger position in the sort of the queue to buy a slot that I think is the right one for me. And again, they give me a huge amount of data to be able to kind of make those decisions, right? And then also they give me a platform to enable me to kind of negotiate the rates. Again, like with Google, I can't tell them how much I want to pay for the traffic. I can't really tell, Facebook how much I want to pay for the traffic. But on programmatic, I can dictate, right, what the CPM rate is by site, by app, right, by exchange. I can kind of dictate all of that, right? And also I can kind of capture that information. But again, I think for me, programmatic in isolation doesn't work very well. Programmatic as part of an omni-channel sort of strategy works incredibly well.
Gotcha. And what's the entry-level budget that you would recommend to people who are just entering them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, it's kind of from my perspective. I mean, when I was working with Basis Technologies, I needed to commit to spend a certain amount of money on a monthly basis in order for me to get a dedicated rep, right? But if you didn't have a dedicated rep, you can kind of probably set up an account with them for maybe $500 a month, right? And again, I think in most cases, I wouldn't go into it with the mentality of like, what's the minimum commitment? I would go into it with I'm doing well on Facebook, I'm doing well on Google, right? I want to now kind of expand my kind of opportunity, because I think although there is, some of the traffic will be the same people, right? There is definitely new audiences that you can kind of find that don't necessarily go to Facebook or Google, right? Equally, there'll be people that have left the Facebook and Google ecosystem to go off somewhere else. And I want to be able to continue the conversation there, right? And I think also, again, like with the programmatic side of things, I have the opportunity to do things like audio advertising, right? So I can do, I can target people that are running on SoundCloud or Spotify, right? I can also do what they call hyper-local targeting. So what I can do is again, this is beautiful for things like if you're an event company, right? And let's say again, I'm a HubSpot partner, right? And HubSpot have an event every year called Inbound, right? And if you think about it, everyone that's at Inbound is definitely dedicated to the HubSpot ecosystem, CRMs, and everything else. And what I can do is I can basically target the venue that particular event is on, right? And that becomes like the targeting is the mobile phone that people have in their pockets, right? So if they fire up any app, right? So again, most people, when they're going to kind of an event, they'll fire up like weather.com to see what the weather is, right? And I can have an ad that appears in weather.com, right? By using hyper-local targeting based upon the fact that I know they're in that building at that time. What I can then do is obviously those people can then be put into an audience. So when they scurry from the event back to their homes, wherever that happens to be, I can continue the conversation by running a remarketing campaign because I built an audience up of people who are actually in the venue.
That's true.
I spend a lot of time historically traveling to venues to speak at them and everything. And now I can probably, I'm not saying I wouldn't do that because I enjoy it, right? But it also gives me the capability, if I decide that there's an event that I wanted to be at, I can at least have ads at the event, even if I'm not physically at the event.
Gotcha. Can you please share one of the most successful case studies that you have? Because it's been a decade now for the agency, and would love to.
Yeah. So I think, again, I think in some respects, like, again, I'm not a huge fan of case studies in the traditional sense, right? Because again, I think sometimes people will give you a kind of top level, here's the headline, but there's underlying things that kind of deliver performance at a good or bad level, right? So I think in some respects, like, I'd probably go back to probably one of the most successful things that I did was I found, and again, because I've done this a couple of times, it's something I'm always looking for, right? But I always look for, I call it a unicorn keyword, right? And a unicorn keyword is a keyword that you find that nobody else is using, right? And it used to be like, historically, there was a lot more opportunity to find them because Google didn't match things up the way they do now, right? But certainly back in the day, you could find a keyword, nobody else was bidding on it, right? You could kind of really do well. So I found a keyword, right, that I was able to bid on my own, right? It was on Yahoo, so it wasn't even on a Google property, it was on Yahoo. Clicks on Google would cost me $10 a click, would cost me 10 cents on Yahoo. Right. And I was getting probably 400 to 500 clicks a day. right? And I was doing lead generation and I was getting paid about $14 a lead, right? And the offer that I was running was converting at about 35 to 40%, right? So from a conversion perspective, it was just like insane, right? And I ran that offer for about 18 months, right? And again, it was a phenomenal opportunity. And ever since then, what I've tried to do is I've tried to go into every industry that I work with each client, right? And try and see if there are any unicorn keywords, because if there are, then, you know, again, it really kind of does well.
Gotcha.
But again, it's you know, I think the challenge is that, you know, a lot of it is people go, oh, I've done this case study and I had these many campaigns and these different ad groups and this ads and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, honestly, like, so I think sometimes you can kind of like throw darts at the board and you'll get lucky, right? And I think a lot of it is got to be repeatable. If you kind of do something and repeat it time and again consistently, right? Which is what we as an agency we've done. We've been able to onboard a client, right? So again, like just generally speaking, as a thing, right? I would probably say if 10 people approached the agency wanting to work with us, we'll probably decline 8 of them because they're not a good fit for us, right? And I think most agencies will bite your hand off to kind of work with you, right? Whereas for us, we're much more selective. I've got to like the people, right? First and foremost, right? Because if I don't like the people, then I just know that it's not going to be a fun experience, no matter how much kind of like money's on the table. That's not really what drives our agency, right? Again, I've never been a.
Mine also matters.
Yeah, I don't want to be one of these like, we want to be a 7-figure agency, 8-figure. I don't care, right? That's not really the driving force for me, right? What I want to do is I want to work with like-minded clients so that we can get on really well with, right? That we can kind of do good things collaboratively together, that we respect each other's resource, right? So again, I don't want them to kind of like, you know, hit on my resource and treat them badly, right? I've fired lots of clients in the past where, you know, they've talked badly to team members that I had. And I'm like, you know what, I care much more about my team members than I do about the relationship with you as the client, right? And my team loved me for that, right? But again, I didn't do that. I you know, for me, it is. I mean, you know, if you're running an agency, right, your team are the most important people to you, right? You know, without your team, you're nothing, right? And you know, and I just think it's sort of like I've seen too many junior people in an agency get completely slaughtered by clients, which, you know, is totally unfair, right? I just don't think that should be appropriate.
I think as in service in general as well, people working for you are your biggest asset, right? And like in general too, like people should value, and companies should value their employees, right?
Yeah. And I think that value has got to be more than just what you pay them, right? I don't think it's just about how well you pay them. I think there's got to be, again, like most people go into an agency, right? And they will go in because they have aspirations to kind of move up the ranks, right? They want to become managers. I always say to people, like, you say you want to become a manager until you are a manager, and then you hate being a manager, right? You know, but equally they say, I want to run my own business. And I always say, look, once you run your own business, I mean, it's a different sort of kettle of fish than kind of, you know, not running your own business. And they have aspirations to do it. And I'm like, okay, great. And again, I've had people that work with me in the past where they wanted to go off and run their own businesses. And I've actively encouraged them to kind of do that. And I've helped train them to make sure that when they did go and do it, that they weren't going to fall flat on their face. Right. Because I know that as an industry, this is a growing industry, even though we're, you know, again, I've been doing it for 20 odd years. When I first started, there was probably less than 1,000 people worked in digital marketing. And now there's probably 500,000 people just in the UK that do it. Right. Maybe even more than that. I don't know. Right. But again, it's like there are still far too many clients that need help, right? Than agencies to provide the help. Right. And what I want to make sure is that if people are going to provide services to clients, that they're skilled enough to enable them to do that properly, because I want the clients to have a good experience and I want their end users to have a good experience, right? And if it's done through my agency, great. If it's done through another agency where I've been able to help somebody who set up that agency, fantastic. I'm not so greedy that I want it all to be through me. I'm quite happy to spread some of the love around.
It's very nice. That's very nice. Any horror story that you would like to share with us?
So yeah, I mean, there's one particular story, which again, I mean, this is more to do with the process, right? I remember being on holiday. I was in holiday in Cyprus, right? And I'm sitting by a pool. I've got my mobile phone, the phone rings and it's one of my biggest clients who's phoning me to say he's standing at the top of his building and he's about to jump off the building, right? And I'm like, why, what's happened? And he said, well, I've just had your invoice, right? And basically we were paying for the media, right? And what had happened is that one of my team had basically, he had a sort of spend cap. We'd gone over the spend cap, even though we were delivering lots of leads and sales for them, right? He had an expectation of what we should have spent, what we did spend, right? And obviously he didn't want to pay the difference, right? And I could have argued the point, said, well, I can't get the leads back, right? I can't, the extra leads that I generated for you, you've processed them, you've made money from them. And obviously I can't get them back, right? I can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? So once it's out, it's out. But I had to make a decision on what to do. So I basically had to fork up, I think it was about £30,000 to pay the difference between what I'd invoiced him for and what we'd actually spent, right? Because I obviously had a commitment to spend to pay the money to Google, and he had a commitment to pay me, and there was that £30,000 difference. And I worked on the basis it was better for me to retain the client, right, than to try and argue the point about, getting that extra money and losing the client, losing my reputation. So for me, and again, I think I kept him as a client for probably another 18 months, 2 years, and then he sold his business and moved on. And again, I mean, I'm still kind of good friends with him now. So,
Nice.
but for me, having to kind of like dig into my pockets and find £30,000 was tough, and it was a bit of a horror story for me at that point.
Yep. I can imagine, right?
But again, as I mentioned, like as an agency, we're very process driven. So again, we have a stringent process now for if we are kind of like holding the kind of responsibility for spending the advertising dollars, right?
Yep.
We have a process for ensuring that the client is okay with spending more than the original amount that was agreed.
Yep.
So
that's brilliant. Any final words that you would like to share with our viewers?
I have a Facebook group called Elite Media Buyers, right, which is a sort of side project. I mean, I say a side hustle, it's not a side hustle. It's really a passion project, right? I want to try and help develop and train the next generation of media buyers, right, to do well. So again, I want to make sure that as an industry, we can continue to evolve and grow, right? So anyone that kind of watching this or listening to it, right, I mean, there's a website, elitemediabuyers.com, and also a Facebook group. And the reason I've got sort of two separate pieces is Facebook groups are very tenuous. Facebook own it. They could shut it down at any point in time. We have a community on elitemediabuyers.com, right, where people can sign up. They get a free account. They have a forum there, right? Again, I have a lot of people that are very questioning of like, why do I need your email address and everything? Honestly, I don't have time to kind of like send people spam emails, right? I just genuinely want to help the community do well in the future, right? And again, for me, it's almost like I'm losing money on the Elite Media Buyers as a brand, right? But I'm happy to do that because I think it's a worthy cause, and I want to try and grow that as much as I can. So anyone that's kind of watching or listening, if you want to go to elitemediabuyers.com, right, or I think it's facebook.com/Elite Media Buyers, or groups/Elite Media Buyers. Anyway, type Elite Media Buyers, you'll find it. And again, I'd love people, you can see this little counter behind me. This is my YouTube channel, right? You can see it's got a counter on there, 306. That's where I am at the moment. I really want to kind of grow my YouTube channel because I'm trying to kind of create more content on there to help educate the next generation of media buyers, right? So anyone that's watching, if you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/ I think it's Jim Banks 1, right? So, and again, I'd love it if you could kind of subscribe to the channel and help me grow that.
Definitely, we'll post this, these URLs on our YouTube as well.
I'm sure you can put it on the notes and go from there.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank you for all the time and the valuable tips and lessons that you've shared and your experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Harshit.